صباح الخير عليكم جميعا أو مساء الخير. أتمنى تكونوا بخير وكويسين إن شاء الله. As you all know by now, we have covered labor market equilibrium in chapter 3 that we have covered together during the actual lectures. Then we shifted to the goods and services market equilibrium in chapter 4 that we have covered in the two audio lectures that I've posted already on FEP's YouTube channel. Today we will complement the whole picture by studying another vital market, which is the financial asset market. If you just go backwards for to the goods and services market, we reach the equilibrium through this very basic equilibrium condition equating aggregate supply and aggregate demand, which was reduced to the equivalent condition of equating aggregate desired savings and aggregate desired investment. The financial market actually is the channel through which the resources move between savers and investors. So that's why we say that we will complement it, because this market has a very vital role in the economy. يعني ايه financial asset market? The financial asset market is just like any other market, except that the nature of products and services are totally different, or they have a different specific nature. Basically, we can lump them up into two categories: the monetary assets and the non-monetary assets. The monetary assets are basically money, the currency that we have in hands, the cash, or the checkable deposits that you hold at the banks, الحساب الجاري في البنوك, that you can withdraw at any time money from them and use them for your transactions to buy goods and services. And the non-monetary assets, those are like stocks, bonds, gold, real estate, durable goods like cars, for example. Any asset that you believe that they are a good store of value, that they will bring you a relatively high rate of returns. Okay, as you see, this is the chapter outline. The first 2 points, or the first 2 sections, you have already covered. They are talking about the money, why do we demand money, the main functions of money, and then what are the main determinants of the demand for assets, for financial assets. How do we distribute or allocate our demand across various assets. Those 2 points you have already discussed and studied during your money and banking course, and also the introductory macroeconomic course that you took last year. But again, I will quickly and shortly review them, because we need to have them in the background of our discussion. Then comes the third section, which is the main, third and fourth are represent the main core of the chapter, the demand for money and the asset market equilibrium. The demand for money, we will discuss together the macroeconomic variables that affect the demand for money, and we will derive the aggregate demand, money demand function. Then we will discuss how the asset market reaches equilibrium. Section 7.5, which is related to money growth and inflation, is cancelled. So you will have to have 7.1 and 7.2 as your background to review them. You won't be asked in them, but you have to have them in the background, and then you have to know by heart 7.3 and 7.4. Okay, as I just mentioned in the beginning of this lecture, money is among the financial assets that we're talking about. Money has a very specific nature. It's very vital. That's why we will be focusing on money demand, money supply, and the equilibrium in the money market during this, when we study the financial asset market. Why? Because money plays a vital role. Through money we express prices, and through prices we have the value of our nominal variables, like the nominal GDP, for example. We couldn't have the value without the prices. We cannot add, as we saw before, apples to oranges. We have to have the values, and the values come from the prices, and the prices come from the money. They are in money terms. And it is believed that the money side affects the real side of the economy. Inflation affects also the employment and output. So understanding money is really vital to understand the real side of the economy. How would we use the monetary policy to affect or to boost the economy, for example, if it went into a recession, for example? And thus it is a vital variable in understanding or affecting the main goals of macroeconomics, which are, if you still remember, achieving high rates of economic growth, high output growth, low rates of unemployment, and stable rates of inflation. Before going further, I would like to stress on some definitions of some terms that we will be facing during our discussion. Probably know them, but I would like to make sure that they are clear. The word portfolio, الحافظة أو portfolio, the financial portfolio is just like the المحفظة اللي في جيبكو. It has the set of it groups the financial assets that you have within your wealth. Portfolio allocation decision, it is regarding how much should I get from each asset. How the wealth, for example, I have a certain amount of wealth, and how would I distribute it among stocks, bonds, land, apartments, cash money, and so forth. What about, you will see also that we use during the discussion of this chapter, we will be using the word wealth and income, but they are not the same. Remember the discussion that we had in, I guess, the very end of chapter 2, that we discussed the difference between wealth and savings. So it was this difference between stock and flow, if you still remember. It's the same here. The income is your flow. You have income coming, okay, that you make because you are an owner of a factor of production or factors of production, and you have the accumulation of your income presents your wealth. So it's stock versus flow. But they tend to move together. When your income increases, your wealth increases. But this is not usually the case. For example, if you took two extreme cases, like our grandparents, for example, they don't have ongoing income, but yet they have hopefully accumulated huge wealth across their career time. So there's a big difference now you see between income and wealth versus yourself. For example, when you graduate, inshallah, you might have, hopefully not, you might have a negative wealth. Negative wealth meaning that your liabilities exceed your assets. Remember, wealth is the difference between your liabilities and assets. But hopefully you join or you get employed in a good position that you earn big income through. So that's how we see the difference between income and wealth. I wanted just to stress it in order to make the discussion more clear when we bring up the two terms. Okay, what are the main functions of money? Why do we actually demand money? As I mentioned before, money has a very specific nature that makes it playing a very vital role in the economy. And we basically demand it for transactions, to fulfill our transactions. And how would we do that except if it is not acceptable by all of us? So it's a medium of exchange, which means that it is acceptable by all actors in the economy as a medium of exchange, that we can exchange our goods and services in return for money. طبعا ده مش هخش بقى في البارتر economy and so on. You already have studied this before. Money has another vital role, which is the unit of account, a unit of measurement. Like the centimeter is a unit of measurement for length, for example, and the kilogram for weight, or the pounds, and so on. Money is the measurement of economic values of products and services. زي ما قلت قبل كده مثلا nominal GDP, how could I have reached it? I couldn't have, we can't add various products, the quantities of various products to each other. So we need to unify the values. How could we, except with multiplying them by prices, and prices are derivative from money. That's why money plays a vital role as a unit of account. But we have to take care that not necessarily having a certain currency as a unit of account, it is the same as a medium of exchange. Usually it is, but it's not the case always. زي مثلا if we took the case of the Egyptian pound, during when the Egyptian pound was experiencing high loss of value when we started floating the Egyptian pound, the devaluation of it, or the loss of value made people revert to the dollars as a unit of measurement. Not everyone, of course, but some entities like schools. Some schools had their fees evaluated in dollars. Why did they do so? Because they reverted to a currency that has a stable value. But yet the medium of exchange was still the Egyptian pound. This is just يعني ملحوظة صغيرة to know that the medium of exchange is not necessarily always the unit of account, but they usually are. This is the demanding money to perform transactions represent the transaction demand. To buy goods and services, this represents the transaction demand. This is highly fulfilled by liquid money. The money زي ما قلت, the cash that we have in hand, or sometimes referred to as currency, or the checkable accounts that الحساب الجاري اللي في البنوك. Okay? But money is demanded in some cases as an asset, though in rare cases. In former times, people demanded money and accumulated money at home in very old, during very, very former times, very old times, as a kind of store of value, because it didn't represent any kind of risk, and it was highly liquid. I can use any time to exchange for goods and services. Yet today, non-monetary assets represent a higher or a better store of value, since they give us or we can earn through them a higher rate of return, and they also present a better way to preserve the value of wealth, because they witness usually increase in value of the product itself, or increase in interest rates at the return of some other financial assets like stocks and shares and savings accounts, for example. Okay. We have different definitions of money. We also this is an issue that you have discussed, the difference between M1 and M2. M1 is basically covers or is formed out of the transaction money, the liquid money, the currency or the cash money in form of coins and paper, or the bank money, the checkable deposits. Again, الحساب الجاري في البنوك اللي ممكن أسحب منه أي وقت to pay my transactions. So M1 is the highly liquid money with the very low rate of return. Whereas M2 includes, in addition to M1, the highly liquid money or the transaction money, plus the non-monetary financial assets like the saving deposits, bonds, stocks, and so forth. So during the text, you will be when we talk about the money supply, it's either M1 or M2. You shouldn't be bothered about that. But more or less لما هنتكلم على demand function, demand money, أنا آسفة, money demand function, we'll be talking about M1. بس you shouldn't really worry about that. But we have to bear in mind the difference between M1 and M2. Okay, برضو this is another issue that you have already covered in your money and banking course. Open market operations. Who is responsible for the money supply, the amount of money available in the economy? اللي بيقدر يتحكم ده هو central bank, this independent entity. بيتحكم عن طريق open market operations by buying or selling financial assets, زي أكبر مثل treasury bills. Through this trading, for example, if the central bank wants to inject money in the circulation in the economy, in the money, it wants to inject more money in the circulation. It would buy, هتشتري التريجري بيلز اللي هي قلنا عليها كمبيالات الحكومة بتكتبها على نفسها. هتشتري التريجري بيلز أو تشتري any financial assets, but treasury bills is the most common example from the public. طبعا مش الناس نفسها بس through the banks. فلما بتشتريها بتدي money في المقابل، فبالتالي بتinject more money and thus increases the money supply and reduces the money supply vice versa. It sells financial assets, sells treasury bills that it owns. Okay. When it sells the financial assets هتبيعهم، يبقى هتاخد to withdraw، هتشفط الماني supply الموجود في السوق أو في الاقتصاد in the economy. It will withdraw money from the circulation. This is the open market sale. So through open market purchases or open and sales or open market operations in general, the central bank gets the money supply in control. Okay, then we'll discuss quickly the main variables or the main determinants of our allocation decision regarding our portfolio distribution across various financial assets. قد إيه هطلب from each financial asset and what are the main determinants for my demand of each asset. Basically يعني by logic they are the expected return. كل ما return بيعلى كل ما I will go and demand more of this asset. The risk, the liquidity and time of maturity. Let's discuss quickly. As I just mentioned, the rate of return, it could be the increase of the value. زي البond for example, it increases in value. لو الشركة دي ناجحة وبتزيد قيمة البوند ده السند ده by time, or it gives me a higher rate of return, like for example a savings account, it gives me a higher interest rate. So the rate of return defines or determines my decision either to increase the demand for this asset, financial asset or not. So keeping other variables constant, زي liquidity, زي risk and so forth, we would expect we would go or demand more of this financial asset as long as its expected return is higher. طبعا بنقول expected ليه because you don't know the future. يعني بنقول دلوقتي إن مثلا you should invest in buying bonds of this company, but in the future maybe this company would fail and you will lose your part of your money. That's why we say expected, because mostly the rate of return it belongs to the future, so we have to add the word expected. The risk, طبعا most of us are risk averse. We don't like to take risk. We don't like to lose our money. So we would always go to the low risk assets, keeping other variables constant. I mean, other things constant, other determinants constant. So as long as the risk is lower, then we would prefer this asset. However, the risk, what is the risk? The risk is the variability in the return or the uncertainty of this asset's return. The difference between what I actually get and what I was expecting. This is the risk. The risk premium that I can achieve is the amount that I gain by this relatively high expected rate of return as compared to the return that I could have earned by getting more a safer asset. So يعني by conclusion كل ما risk يزيد كل ما demand بتاعي على financial asset دي هيقل, keeping other variables constant. Liquidity represents the flexibility of using the asset. ان انا يوم ما عاوز افك الاسset ده to use the money, why do I have assets? In order to, the ultimate goal is to get what I want from goods and services at the end of the day يعني. So the flexibility of this asset to convert it to money that I can quickly use in buying the what I need of goods and services represents the liquidity. Money طبعا هي احسن صورة for a liquid asset, but it gives us a very low rate of return, whether in cash form, which is zero interest rate, or checkable deposits, which gives us a very low interest rate, like مثلا في بعض الدول 0.2%, or like هنا مثلا ممكن تبقى around 2%, and maybe lower these days. Assets like cars, for example, or real estate can be very, very illiquid. I need time to find someone to buy it. هدفع مصاريف للبروكر السمسار اللي هيبيعها لي. It will take time to, even if I sold it, will go للشهر العقاري نسجلها. يعني it has many transaction costs to shift them or to convert them to liquid money that we can use easily in exchange of goods and services that we need. Stocks and bonds lie in between. ولا هي very liquid like money أو ولا هي very illiquid like cars and houses and lands, for example. طبعا we will all prefer liquid assets. If I know that there are many restrictions on it, أو السوق دلوقتي نايم مش هقدر أبيع العربية بسهولة أو مش هقدر أبيع البيت بسهولة, I would revert to other liquid assets, other things, constant of course. And the last determinant for our demand decision for financial assets هيبقى time of maturity. So the time of return. أنا ممكن يبقى عندي long term bond or a short term bond. إن أنا for example, let's take another example like الوديعة اللي في البنوك. You put in your savings account, you put some amount of money and the banks sign a contract with you saying that you cannot withdraw money during let's say if it is the maturity of this وديعة or this savings account is like 1 year. يبقى ما تقدرش تكسرها قبل 1 year. And if you did so, you will lose an amount of the principal money, الماني اللي انت حطيتها اصلا, okay, that you will be repaid by it at the end. بس during the time of the year you will be earning interest rate. خلاص. So the amount of time that you have to wait to until you get repaid the principal that you paid, الوديعة اللي انت دفعتها اصلا, this is the time of maturity. طبعا the longer the time, the higher the cost that I would bear. So the longer the time, we should expect a higher rate of return, higher interest rate to compensate for the cost of waiting. Yeah. Okay. So, talking about the individual level, this is another point that I need to stress on. زي ما احنا متعودين دايما we talk about all variables on the individual level, زي ما عملنا في labor, زي ما عملنا في goods and services. We talk about individual and then we aggregate and on the national level, and what applies on the individual will apply on the aggregate level. This is for simplicity. طيب. The assets demand represent the amount that we need from all assets or from different assets or that constitute my wealth. الwealth بتاعي هيبقى متوزع ما بين مثلا different alternative forms of financial assets like bonds, car, house, piece of land, gold, stocks, bond, and cash money of course. كل دول forms of financial assets, monetary and non-monetary. So the sum of assets demand will definitely be equal to my total wealth. ما هو الwealth هيروح فين تاني؟ هيروح either in the form of cash or different forms اللي قلناهم دلوقتي, and that's it. So my total wealth will be equal to the sum of asset demands. Okay? This is on individual level. طبعا there's always a trade-off زي ما قلنا في كل all the discussions that we went through till now. There's always a trade-off. If you prefer higher returns, then you would take higher risk, less liquidity, and maybe longer time of maturity. And vice versa, low risk, for example, if I wanted to carry more cash money, then I prefer very low risk, very high liquidity, but very low expected returns. Okay, so it's usually the wealth is distributed among the various kinds of financial assets, carrying various kinds of risks and various kinds of liquidity. مش بحط كله في حتة واحدة. يعني I don't deviate to one asset, otherwise I won't be rational enough. So we should be diversifying. بيقول حتى the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because if one loses, you will lose tremendous amount. So you distribute the risk across the various assets you have. This is the rational way of thinking. يعني تبقى the collection or the group of financial assets that I have having various attributes, having one having low risk, high liquidity, low expected rate of return, and another having a very high expected rate of return, though with higher degree of risk and lower degree of liquidity, for example. Okay. Okay, now we shift to the core of the chapter. All what we talked about you already know by heart. Maybe it was just refreshing your memory. Now we talk about the main core of the chapter, which is the demand for money. As I mentioned, we'll be focusing basically on money, as in cash or currency or checkable deposits, the money that we use for transaction. So the demand for money is the quantity of monetary assets. زي ما قلنا في الأول خالص, we divide the financial assets between two groups, monetary and non-monetary. Okay, so money طبعا is the monetary, is within the monetary group. Like any other financial asset that we just discussed now, the main determinants are the expected return, risk, liquidity, time of maturity. Money is one financial asset, so it depends also on such variables. The money demand depends on such variables. And we know that the expected rate of return is almost zero. For the cash is zero. Interest rate for the currency that we have or the cash that we have in our pockets is zero. For the checkable accounts is very low, as we mentioned before. Very low risk. I won't lose anything by carrying money. However, the economic loss, just bear this in mind also, the economic loss is the interest rate that I could have earned if I've put my money in another form of a non-monetary asset. Okay, opportunity cost. Always think. We know this way of thinking all over our course, that we should understand the foregone return. Okay, so the money that we decide to hold depends on our priorities, how much liquidity, the degree of flexibility that I need in order to finance my transactions. أنا عندي متطلبات كتيرة جدا، مدارس وهدوم وأدوية ومحتاجة دلوقتي كمامات ومحتاجة كحول ومحتاجة ف I need more liquid money. This will affect my decision on how much money I need to hold now. Okay. Then we move to the discussion of the effect of the main macro or the key macroeconomic variables on money demand. We're still talking about money demand. We'll see the effect of price level, the real income, the interest rates of both non-monetary and monetary, and then we'll shift. Those are the main key in macroeconomic indicators that we will talk about, and that will enter into the money demand function on individual and aggregate level, and then we will add more macroeconomic variables that affect the money demand, which are wealth, risk, and the liquidity of alternative assets to money, and the payment technologies available in the economy. Okay, let's start by discussing the effect of price level. It's very reasonable to assume the higher the price level, the more money that we will need for performing our transactions. زي مثلا أكيد you're experiencing مثلا an increase in the prices of masks, for example, that we need to protect ourselves during the corona time. العلبة مثلا was for like I don't know 50 pounds, and today it's 250 if you even find it. So this increase in price would definitely increase our demand for money for transactions. Okay, so this increase is, or this relationship between the price, the change in price, and the change in demand for money is proportional, which means that if the price level doubles, then my demand for money will double, or triples, my demand for money will triple, and so forth. So the relationship is 1-to-1. The money demand will experience the same increase in prices. Real income. Definitely, if you experience an increase in your real income, you would need more money to perform your transactions. But the issue is, let's look at it like my real income increased. I will demand more money for transactions, but I will again remember that the money is like a product that I demand more with my increase in real income. But I have another category, which is the non-monetary assets. Look at the monetary assets as if they are the basics or the necessary products, and the non-monetary as if they are the luxurious products. لما دخلنا بيزيد بطلب السلعة الضرورية money. I will demand the necessary product, which is the money in our example. But when my income increases more and more, I start to have this luxury of buying non-monetary assets. ابتدي أفكر أنا خلاص يعني I don't need such an increase in my transaction or money demand for transaction. I would rather put my wealth in a different form, like non-monetary assets. That I could gain a higher expected return from. يعني بمعنى تاني ان انا لما الريل انكم بتاعي بيزيد هزود طلبي على الماني the liquid money, but I would also, with the increase in my real income, I would start to think about the other products that I couldn't have got at a lower level of income. I wasn't able to buy before or to own before. وهبتدي أزود طلبي ليها. Thus, the increase in my demand for money would increase with the increase in my real income, but with a lower rate than my increase in real income. يعني لو real income مثلا زاد ب 10%, I would expect that the demand for money, the liquid money, would increase for transaction would increase by 5%, let's say. So it's a relation not one-to-one as in the case of price level, but rather lower than one-to-one, less proportional. ليه؟ لأني ببتدي أفكر in other products, financial products, non-monetary products that I can get now. فبالتالي the increase in my real income will be distributed among other variables than monetary assets. And this applies also on the national level. لو مثلا in primitive economies, في الاقتصادات البدائية, in primitive economies, they don't have this various array of financial assets like stocks and bonds and mutual funds and pension funds and so forth. Then people with the increase in real income, they will devote the increase. This increase will be directed to increase in demand for money for transaction, because they don't have other options. But with the development of the economy, the financial assets become more sophisticated. We have more options to choose from, more options for financial assets, to choose from. And thus, with the increase in real output, but we're talking about the national level, the aggregate level, then we would expect that the money demand will rise, but less proportionally, less than one-to-one with the rise in the aggregate real output or real income. Okay, interest rates. عندنا نوعين من interest rates. We have the interest rate, which is very minimal, very trivial on the monetary assets. Okay, we will denote it, هتشوفوا بعد كده with IM. And we have the interest rate on non-monetary assets, which will denote it, again, you will see it later, with I, only I. So when you read I, this is a nominal interest rate on non-monetary assets, and I M, with this exponential M or this notation M, it refers to the interest rate on money or monetary assets. طيب طبيعي جدا with the increase in interest rate on non-monetary assets, I will demand تاني, we are focusing on the demand for money. So then I need to see the effect of the increase in interest rate on or the rate of return on non-monetary assets on my demand for money for transactions. Okay, so then this increase would definitely lower my demand for money. هروح أفضل إن أنا I would prefer to put my or distribute my wealth in non-monetary assets, وهضحي بالliquidity اللي كانت بتديهاني الماني. ليه؟ لأن الانترست ريت عالي على non-monetary assets. and vice versa. إذا الانترست rate عالي على الماني, interest rate for example it's only on the checkable accounts, no interest rate on the cash of course, or كلمة cash and currency we use it equivalently عشان ما تتلخبطوش وانتوا بتقروا الشابتر. The increase in interest rate on money زي على checkable accounts would induce me to demand more money in this liquid form. ليه؟ لأن هي بتديني this privilege of having high liquidity. So at the end of the day it's our decision, our priority. Would I prefer higher return versus lower liquidity, or higher liquidity versus lower return? Okay, but that's the basic relationship. With the increase in interest rate on non-monetary assets, definitely the demand for money will decrease. With the use of this very illustrative diagram done by Dr. Heba Atif, many thanks for her, that I have been using all over the slides, and I already told you that before. You see the increase in expected return on money, which is the interest rate with the notation M. This is the interest rate on checkable accounts. If it increased, then I would, this would definitely deviate me to demand more money, or to induce me to increase my money demand. And the other way, if an increase or the return for alternative non-monetary assets experienced an increase, this would induce me to demand them more, and thus lower my demand for money. Okay, before going further, we need to make some assumptions to make the analysis زي ما بنعمل دايما, to make the analysis to simplify the analysis in general. زي ما احنا قلنا, احنا we are lumping up the or grouping the financial assets that we have into two groups, monetary and non-monetary. Okay. Monetary, we said it before several times, it includes the cash, the currency that we have in hand, and the checkable accounts. The non-monetary includes everything else: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, pension funds, and land, cars, and so forth. Regarding the non-monetary assets, we will assume that, of course, within the non-monetary assets, the stocks, the bonds, the savings accounts, every kind of financial asset provides me with a different interest rate, but they all move together. At the end of the day, they all move together in one direction. Okay, if an interest rate increases, you would expect the interest rate on other forms of financial non-monetary asset increase. Then we will assume that it is only one nominal interest rate representing all of them. Okay. And we will also assume that all non-monetary assets that we gave example of دلوقتي حالا, they have the same risk and liquidity. طبعا this is not true, but we will assume it for simplicity. And we will exclude the IM, which we just mentioned, that this represents the interest rate on the checkable accounts, the monetary interest rate. Since why do we, is it reasonable? Yes, it's reasonable to exclude it because أولا it's trivial, it's very low, it represents a very low interest rate, and it doesn't experience lots of variations. It's more or less stable, so it's very safe to exclude it from our analysis. And finally, that what we mentioned before, we will analyze on the individual and going up to the aggregate. What applies on the individual will apply on the aggregate. دول assumptions that we need to go further in the analysis or in the discussion regarding demand for money. Okay. We discussed دلوقتي the effects of the main macroeconomic indicators, namely price level, real output or real income, and interest rate. Okay. Or the nominal interest rate. Specific I represents the nominal interest rate on non-monetary assets. Remember, we will exclude the IM or the nominal interest rate on monetary assets. وقلنا ليه حالا. Okay, this is the demand function. The demand function representing the demand for money proportional to the price level. ده اللي احنا لسه قايلينه ان when the price level doubles, money demand doubles, the relationship is proportional. زي بالظبط اللي بيفكركم في production function بالtotal productivity factor لما كان double, it was برضو a proportional relationship between output and the productivity, total factor productivity اللي كنا denoted by A. برضو راجعوا الكلام ده. Just came to my mind that it would remind you of this relationship. So the price, again, focusing on the money demand function, equation 7.1 denotes or shows us this function. The money demand is proportional to the price level and a function of real income or output, if we're talking about the aggregate level, and which is positively related to the output, to the Y, though less proportional as we discussed before, and inversely related with the nominal interest rate on non-monetary assets, as we have discussed. That when the nominal interest rate on non-monetary assets increases, ده هيخليني to lower my demand for money and go more for the non-monetary assets. اوكي. ده اللي احنا لسه قايلينه في نفس الكلام في السلايد but with a different verbally يعني. اوكي. The aggregate demand function, money demand function, can have different forms. Very simple way of looking at it, but through different versions. الفيرجن اللي احنا لسه شايفينها the nominal aggregate money demand as a function of price level, real output, and nominal interest rate. Nominal interest rate تاني on non-monetary financial assets. Or we simply نشيل nominal interest rate on non-monetary financial assets and we replace it by the definition اللي أخذناها في chapter 2. لو تفتكروا في chapter 2 we ended up the chapter discussing how to calculate the real interest rate. And the real interest rate was merely the nominal interest rate minus the expected inflation rate, pi e. And thus يعني with very simple rearrangement, the nominal interest rate will be equal to the real interest rate plus the expected inflation rate. Okay. عشان كده بقى في 7.2 okay هنشيل من 7.1 هنشيل nominal interest rate and we'll just replace it by the real interest rate and the expected inflation rate. Which means in the same relationship had occur when the interest rate increases, real interest rate on non-monetary asset increases, this will reduce money demand. And when inflation rate increases, this would reduce also our demand for money. هنشوف برضو الإفكت على الانفليشن very soon. Okay, we've seen in the second version was just replacing the nominal interest rate on non-monetary assets, non-monetary financial assets by the definition of the which is equal to the real interest rate plus inflation, expected inflation rate. The third version will be talking about, or we are concerned with the real aggregate money demand. وإحنا عارفين من قبل كده that the real any real variable to calculate it we just simply divide by price level. فاكرين لو تفتكروا لما اتكلمنا في الليبر ماركت equilibrium وكنا بنشوف الريل wage وكنا برضو بنقسم على البرايس level. For example, it measures the purchasing power of the money or it measures the purchasing power of the nominal variable we're talking about. لو مثلا الويج بتاعنا is equal to 100 and I want to buy a product each cost 10, then I'll get 10. Then the purchasing power of this of my wage is 10. So I just divided the 100 divided by 10. لكن مثلا لو البرايسز بتاع اليونت let's say this t-shirt or whatever that you want to buy increased from 10 to 20, you divide 100 divided by 20. Now you can buy 5, only 5 instead of 10. فلما قسمت ال100 على ال20 I got the real side, how the purchasing power of my wage or nominal wage, okay, or expressing the real wage, how the purchasing power of my wage. هنا نفس by the same token we will divide the money demand, the nominal money demand, by price in order to reach the real aggregate money demand. We call it the demand for real balances. We divided both sides. Remember the price في equation 7.2 in the previous slide كانت مضروبة في البرايس, okay, price level. So if we divided both sides by price, we reach the demand for real balances or the real aggregate money demand on the left hand side and the real demand for money as expressed by the L function on the right hand side. فشوفنا كده 3 versions لل demand for money as a function of price level, real output and nominal interest rate on non-monetary assets. ده كان في 7.1 and then we replace the nominal interest rate on non-monetary financial assets with the R plus pi e or the real interest rate plus the inflation rate. جبناها منين? You know it from chapter 2 and it's the previous slide. And then finally the real aggregate money demand, where we divided both sides by the price in order to know the purchasing power or the real money demand, or we call it the demand for real balances. Okay, we finished discussion of the effect of the main macro indicators on demand for money, and those are the main indicators or the variables that enter into the money demand function. ودلوقتي we will start discussing the effects of other macro variables. They have an effect on the demand for money, but yet they don't enter explicitly into the the money demand function. Like for example wealth is more or less, it has the same احنا قلنا it's different than income, but it has more or less the same effect like income, like real income on money demand. A rise in wealth لما يحصل لنا أي زيادة في in our wealth, we would definitely increase also our demand for money that we need for transactions, but not with the same degree of the increase in wealth, because it is distributed among other forms of financial assets. Regarding risk can, like what we're experiencing at the moment, for example during the corona time, risk globally increased, as you can all see and feel. And this affected also the prices of non-monetary assets. The prices of non-monetary assets are going down very quickly. Some stock markets are collapsing. ده بيخلي الناس كل ال firms are not performing as before. Many business are shutting down and so forth. كل ده بيخلي ال stock market أو the values of the non-monetary assets going down and down, and people cannot trust what will tomorrow bring us. The expected returns are even worse. ده اللي بيخلي الناس to deviate away from non-monetary assets and more to money demand in the liquid form. So money demand would increase in such a situation of increased riskiness in the whole economy. And as I said, now you are witnessing such a case. طيب الماني نفسها, does it experience risk? Yes, it experiences risk in the form of inflation. We discussed together in the very beginning of this course examples of galloping inflation, the 2-digit inflation rate, or hyperinflation, more than 2 digits inflation rates. And this would be translated into lower value of money. What I could buy is getting less and less. The purchasing power of money is getting weaker and weaker. زي ما شفنا الإكزامبل بتاع the nominal wage that it can get with a certain level of price gets lower and lower with increases in price level. اوكي زي ما شفنا المثل بتاع التيشيرتس لو انا دخلي او my wages nominal wages equal to 100 اقدر اجيب 10 t-shirts if the price is 10, but I can get only 5 if the price is 20. Okay, so the purchasing power of money gets lower and lower with inflation, with higher inflation rates. In this case, people don't trust money anymore. Money is not a store of value, not a good store of value anymore, and people revert to non-monetary assets to hedge against inflation. Hedging بمعنى ان انا بحمي نفسي، يعني زي بعمل hedge is الهedge بالانجليزي زي سور او هنا بالمعنى ان انا I'm protecting myself against financial loss. Financial loss due to this decline in purchasing power of money or the value of money. بحمي نفسي ازاي؟ I go and buy more non-monetary assets. أكيد بتسمعوا إن مثلا لا go for it's the time to buy a piece of land or a house because it preserves the value. زي الفلوس اللي بتفقد قيمتها يوم عن يوم مثلا. So it's a way to hedge ourselves during high inflation rate periods of high inflation. We revert to non-monetary assets more and decline our demand for money. Okay, other variables that affect also our demand for money, the decision to demand money more or less, is the liquidity of alternative assets. It goes without saying, the more liquidity that alternative assets gives us or provides us with, the more I will demand them and the less I will demand money. Okay, so it's a negative relationship again with the demand for money. كل ما ليه؟ لأن the other forms gives me higher return and now they give me more liquidity، يبقى أكيد I will go for them and I will reduce my demand for money. Okay, the more quickly and easily alternative assets can be converted into cash, the less I need to hold money and hence the less demand for money. زي مثلا let's كده take a very simple example. طبعا ال competition with financial intermediaries, the brokers, the financial intermediaries اللي بنتعامل من خلالهم زي البنوك زي ال mutual funds and so forth, brings this privilege to us as consumers. يعني هيديني دلوقتي ان يفضل يديني مزايا عشان to be attracted to buy from this entity more financial assets. ومن المزايا دي higher liquidity. And we can take a very simple example regarding innovation effect. لو شفنا مثلا زمان قوي لما كنت احب العربيه مثلا، اتس وسيله برضو لستور اوف فاليو، ان انا عايزه احوش فلوس هشتري عربيه عشان سعرها يزيد ليتر. اوكي، فلما اجي ابيعها مثلا زمان كنت احتاج اعمل موضوع كبير، استنى يوم الجمعه للاهرام احط الاعلان. طبعا انتوا ما عشتوش الوقت ده، بس كان الريستريكشنز كتيره، مش بسهوله قوي ان انا انزل اعلان كل يوم، لا بستنى يوم الجمعه وانزل اعلان. وبعدين جه بعد كده حاجه اسمها جورنال الوسيط برضو كان بيجي كل جمعه، وبعدين بقى كل يوم. وبعدين بعد كده عقبال ما الاقي مشتري والمشتري يقرا الجورنال ده ويجي لي. يعني it was a long procedure to liquidate this asset represented by the car in this case. It took us a long period of time, it was highly restrictive. Nowadays you can just sell the car in minutes by يعني if you're lucky enough by posting on the Facebook for example or posting on any website مختصة بكده. You'll do it in minutes. So you see the effect of innovation on liquidity of alternative assets. فاللي كان بيخليني أبعد زمان عن أنا to buy a car or to buy a house that I won't be able, I need to get a broker that he will take money from me. لا، ده أنا دلوقتي ممكن أعمل القصة دي كلها من خلال الإنترنت and it's becoming with very low cost. Payment technologies as they increase, like the credit cards, the automatic teller machines, ال ATMs اللي موجودة في الشوارع كلها, and other innovation financial innovations reduces the money demand. okay, ممكن الناس ما تحبش تمشي money in their pockets خايفة من السرقة مثلا, and now because now they have the option of having a safe credit card or using the ATM wherever they are. this will reduce the demand for money as long as it experiences such kind of innovations in such technologies. زي مثلا I can now withdraw or add money to my account using the phone banking for example, and it's highly secure also. فكل الانوفيشنز دي بتخليني to reduce the money demand. Okay, this is a very important table summarizing all what we talked about, the impact of the increase in all the variables, the macroeconomic variables, the main one, the price level, the real income, real interest rate, and the expected inflation rate, and also the wealth and risk and liquidity of alternative assets and efficiency of payment technologies على demand on the demand of for money. This summarizes the whole discussion that we had, بس يعني you have to revise it one by one. So for example, if we took like a couple of examples, when the price level increases, We discussed it that the increase in money demand will be proportional. Tripling the price level will triple the money demand, as we mentioned the case of اللي احنا بنشوفها دلوقتي في الكحول وفي الكمامات had increased our demand for money equivalently or in the same proportion, the same rate as the increase in price level. And the real income, the increase in real income will increase our demand also for money, but less proportionally. We discussed it that we with the increase in income we start to think about other non-monetary assets, non-monetary financial assets. That's why it is less proportional than the increase in income. And for example, let's take what else, real interest rate. Real interest rate is the real interest rate on non-monetary assets, and the nominal the real interest rate on non-monetary assets, when it increases, this will make me deviate from the money demand and go more for buying non-monetary assets, and thus the money demand will fall, will decline. Same goes for the expected inflation rate and the nominal interest rate IM, which we excluded from the money demand function due to the very low value that it holds, and also the low degree of variation that it experiences. So with the increase in the nominal interest rate on money, this would increase also the demand for money. ليه؟ لأن كمان money, it has this privilege of being liquid. So when the interest rate عليها بيزيد in the form of the interest rate on the checkable accounts, this will make people willing to hold more money or to demand more money. نفس الشيء بالنسبة للwealth, but it is the same argument like income. Part of this increase will be in the form of transaction money or cash, or increase in demand for money that we hold. زي ما شفنا الريسك can be يجي على non-monetary assets, like the case that we are experiencing nowadays. Stock markets are going down, prices are going down. This is a major risk. You should expect through this analysis that people will demand more money for transactions. So the M1, the demand for in the form of M1 will be increasing. Okay, for currency, for cash and checkable accounts will increase because people will deviate away from the non-monetary assets. أو الريسك التاني اللي على الماني نفسه اللي احنا that lowers the value of money, which is inflation, either in the form of galloping or hyperinflation. وزي ما شفنا liquidity of alternative assets, as long as it increases, this will deviate me away from holding money, because it's better to hold other alternative forms of assets, financial non-monetary assets, since they gave higher returns and now higher liquidity. Okay. And of course we mentioned the payment technologies that allow people or give them this facility to hold less money in their pockets. Okay. Now we move to the final part of this chapter, which discusses the asset market equilibrium. We won't repeat the definition of asset markets. We already mentioned it before. And the demand for any asset, it's the quantity that every one of us want to hold within their portfolio. And the supply is the quantity available at any point of time. And the equilibrium is equating both the quantity that we demand and the quantity available of this asset. هنا as if I'm talking about individual. Okay, then we move to the aggregation assumption. We move on the national level. As we mentioned before, we lumped we divided the financial assets that we have in the economy into two groups, monetary and non-monetary financial assets. The monetary, as we mentioned before, includes the currency, the cash in our hands, and the checkable accounts في البنوك that pay interest rate, very low interest rate, IM, that we excluded from our analysis due to this very trivial value, and also it doesn't experience a lot of variations. So we shouldn't worry about its impact. And the supply of money, which is controlled by the central bank, so we can assume that the decision is out of our hands, so it is a variable given to us, so supply is fixed at M. Non-monetary assets include all other variables: stocks, bonds, land, cars, gold, derivatives, any kind of derivative, mutual funds, pension funds, and so forth. They pay interest rate, nominal interest rate I, without any donation. I mean, without any. So when we say I, it represents the non-monetary, the interest rate on, and the nominal interest rate on non-monetary financial assets. And we know now it is equal by this simple rearrangement is equal to the real interest rate plus expected inflation rate, because we know that the real interest rate on such assets is equal to the nominal minus the expected inflation rate that the issue that we just covered. And again, the supply here is fixed at NM, standing for non-monetary assets, financial assets. Okay, starting from the individual level, which will be always denoted by small letters, the demand for money or the monetary demand, MD, and the non-monetary demand for non-monetary financial assets demand, NM. The small letters belongs to the individual level, while the capital, as you see from equation 7.6, belongs to the aggregate level. So summing up our portfolio on the individual level, going again to the individual level, or starting from the individual level, your portfolio, our portfolio, or our wealth is distributed among various versions of assets, financial assets, either monetary or non-monetary. Where else would it go? So both together, adding them together, the non-monetary and the monetary, would be equal to our total nominal wealth of any individual. Adding up the total nominal wealth on the individual level, we reach the aggregate nominal wealth, and the same applies, which ما فيش طريق تاني. It has either the form of monetary or non-monetary demand for financial assets. 7.7 expresses the supply side, or shows us the supply side, the money supply, which is controlled by as we mentioned, by the central bank, is given, and the non-monetary financial asset supply of non-monetary financial assets is also given, and is equal to the aggregate nominal wealth once more. Again, those are the two only forms of financial assets that can constitute the wealth on the aggregate as well as on the individual level. طيب. Then we can easily subtract 7.7, equation 7.7 from 7.6. We reach 7.8 simply subtracting the supply from the demand, so MD minus M. The first term, starting from the left-hand side, the first term expresses the excess demand if it is a positive amount, or excess supply if it is a negative amount, and the same applies for the second term, NMD minus NM. Once more, we're talking about the aggregate level. Okay, if we subtract it, then we are subtracting the supply from the aggregate demand. So MD minus M plus NMD minus NM, or the non-monetary side of the market. So as if we are dividing the market into two parts: monetary financial assets, and looking at the equilibrium, or the difference between the demand and the supply in it, and the same for the non-monetary. The second term shows us the same for the non-monetary financial assets, difference between the demand and the supply, okay, which is equal to 0, because both are equal to we equated the two equations together. Why did we? Because both sides are equal to the aggregate nominal wealth, are two versions of the aggregate nominal wealth in the whole economy. ليه بنعمل كده؟ So that we can easily say, if we focused on the first term, the money difference between the money demand and the money supply, and this difference is equal to 0, which means that the money demand is equal to the money supply, which means that the money market is in equilibrium. This means automatically that the non-monetary market is also in equilibrium. يعني أنا الحديث عن أحد versions, the monetary or the non-monetary, بيغنيني عن discussing the other side. إذا قلت إن the money demand is equal to the money supply, and the money or or simply the money market is in equilibrium, then it goes without saying automatically that the non-monetary financial asset market is also in equilibrium. Okay, that's why نعمل كل ده عشان to be able to reduce the analysis by only focusing on one market, either the monetary or non-monetary, and we will do it by focusing on the money side, the monetary market, the equilibrium in the monetary market. Okay. Okay. This will يعني give us this freedom to study the asset market equilibrium by studying the money supply and demand. يعني هنريديوس الكلام على الاسset market بتركيزنا على money supply and money demand, and we can ignore the non-monetary ليه because it's implicitly it's the left part. يعني لو أنا قلت إن money supply is equal to money demand, implicitly you know now from 7.8 that the non-monetary market is also in equilibrium. Okay, then the whole financial market is in equilibrium. So that's why we reduce this equilibrium condition to the equating or focusing only on money supply and money demand. Okay, returning to the money demand function and equating the supply M, we know that the supply of money is M, and خلاص احنا دلوقتي we ignore the non-monetary because we know خلاص by heart that if I'm talking about equilibrium in money market, it is if it reached equilibrium necessarily the non-monetary financial market will be in equilibrium زي ما شفنا حالا. So the asset market equilibrium بقى for money, which will be we will be safely كده focusing on, is equal to the real money supply, which is money supply divided by price level, and the real money demand. Okay, so now in this condition the supply is equal to the demand, the real supply is equal to the real demand اللي احنا we discussed it before. We have 5 variables. We have the M, which is the money supply. We said it before that it is decided or determined by the central bank, so it's out of our hands, it's given for us, so we can safely treat it as given, as fixed. And for now we will assume also that the expected inflation rate is fixed. طيب ايه تاني variables اللي عندنا؟ we have the real output. Look the 7.9. We have M, we said it's fixed. We have the expected inflation rate, we assume for now it's fixed, and we have the real interest rate, and then we have the real output, and we have the price level. Let's see. بالنسبة للoutput, remember I shifted now to the labor market equilibrium. The labor market equilibrium defines the level of employment, the equilibrium level of employment, and we said it before, we are working or we are analyzing in the long run. So both the Keynesian and the classical schools agree that we will reach full employment in the long run. Okay, and full employment level, if we put it in the production function, we will get the full employment output or the potential level of output. Okay, so it's the level of output where the labor market is in equilibrium, as the graph shows, as we studied thoroughly before. عشان كده بقول we have to revise the equilibrium in all markets, labor, goods and services, and now the asset market. Okay, so this is for Y. ايه اللي باقي لينا؟ real interest rate and the for real interest rate, go back to the previous chapter 4 that we covered in the audio lectures. R is the equilibrating variable between aggregate desired savings and aggregate desired investment. Okay, or which represents the equality between aggregate supply and aggregate demand. لو تفتكروا الكلام ده. Okay, so R is determined through this equilibrium, through the equilibrium in goods and services market. يبقى بقى لنا ايه؟ بقى لنا the asset market condition will define the price level, determines the price level. If we multiply زي ما شايفين 7.9, it's the same, nothing changed. I'm bringing it again in this slide عشان أفكركم بيها. It's the equilibrium condition in the asset market اللي احنا قررنا ان احنا هنبص عليه بس من خلال تركيزنا على equilibrium in the money market، لأن ده بيعني ضمنيا ان non monetary is also in equilibrium. Okay, So the left hand side shows us the real money supply, and the right hand side is equal to the real money demand. Okay, if we multiplied باصين على 7.9 هنمultiply both sides with P. هتخلص من P في left hand side, and I will add it for the right hand side, and I will divide by the real money demand both sides برضو، يعني كأن ما بعملش حاجة. I will divide M by the real money demand. We on the left hand side when I divide by the real money demand both will go with each other، فهيتبقى لي البرايس level بس. I would advise you to do it by hand، يعني اكتبوها على ورقة، واللي مش فاهم حاجة at any point of time in this or any other chapter please refer to me by email. I would be happy to answer your concerns. طيب نرجع تاني هنا، عرفنا ازاي we came up to 7.10. we multiplied both sides with price level and we divided both sides with real labor real demand for money, the L function. Okay, so we reached 7.10. From 7.10 we see that the price level is equal to the ratio of nominal money supply to the real money demand. Okay, this shows this proportional relationship between money supply, nominal money supply, and price level. So when money supply doubles, nominal money supply doubles or triples, the price level triples. So it's a proportional relationship between nominal money supply and price level. This is a very well-known, one of the oldest, most reliable conclusions in macroeconomics, in macroeconomic behavior, that was supported by empirical evidence, strong, very robust, strong empirical evidence over hundreds or thousands of years. Okay, the increase in money supply هيحصل in the nominal money supply would lead people to increase the nominal spending. لما يبقى عندي money supply أكتر، وطبعا احنا عارفين لو السنترال بانك حب يزود الماني سبلاي هيعمل ايه. لو تفتكروا احنا اتكلمنا عنه قبل كده ال open market operations. Okay, it will increase money supply, it will inject money، يبقى بالتالي it will buy financial assets from the public through the banks, and it will give them in return money، فهت inject money. if this happened, the increase in money supply هيخلينا احنا to increase our nominal demand on goods and services, nominal spending on goods and services. If this was not opposed by an increase in output, and it won't be opposed since we assume that output is fixed at its potential level, at its full employment level, this will lead to an increase in prices. الديماند بيزيد لكن السبلاي ما بيزيدش، يبقى definitely the logic output or the reasonable outcome is an increase in price level. Okay, representing the market equilibrium or the asset market equilibrium condition by focusing on the money part of it, as we mentioned before, representing this in a graphic form or graphically, plotting the real interest rate again on non-monetary financial assets on the vertical axis, and the real money supply, real money demand on the horizontal axis. We see that the real money supply is a vertical line. Why? Because we mentioned before that the money supply is in the hands of the central bank, out of our hands. So it is very reasonable to treat it as given to us as fixed amount. And whereas the money demand is downward sloping, taking a negative slope in relation with the real interest rate on non-monetary assets, as we mentioned before. Remember the summary table, refer to it. Okay, when the real interest rate on non-monetary assets increases, my demand for money, for liquid transaction money, will decline. Okay, and the intersection between both will represent the equilibrium, a point of equilibrium in the asset market, as represented by the money market, between money supply and money demand, as we mentioned before. This will be our starting point in chapter 9 inshallah, where we will gather the three markets all together. بس we will start with the asset market equilibrium once more. Okay, تاني بقول لكم لو في أي حد عنده أسئلة please تولي إيميل أو أي طريقة تفضلوها. I would be more than happy to answer your concerns and questions. Thank you.